Alright, it's time to replace the capacitors in this auto speed unit. This came out of my Seeburg LS2 Gem, circa 1968-69, somewhere in there. And these are all original, it looks like. So it's time to replace them. Maybe these two aren't, but these certainly are. And that certainly is. So time to replace all of them. It works, but I want it to keep working. Not talking about any of the diodes or resistors at this point. I'm just focusing in this video and today on replacing the old capacitors. Alright, so first thing I did was I copied the page out of my service manual to make sure I know what I'm doing. There's 3 different codes. This one happens to be code B, so down I found there's 3 different pages. This is code B, so it tells you what it is. There's only 7 capacitors on here, which is easy, and plenty of finger space in here to get your hands in, which I always like. So if you take a look at this real quick, you're going to see you got up here, you just got your ceramic disc. It's a 0.01 500, no big deal. This is a I think it's a 50 volt Mylar. You've got a big honkin' original Mallory here, which is a 1200 35 volt. And then down here, this thing looks huge, but in reality it's only a 2. But the reason why it's so big, it's the 200 volt, and it's not paper. This is actually a molded Mylar. I just put a paper shell on the outside of it. So it's not a lytic, it's a Mylar. And then you've got 2 more lytics over here, and these are 10 UF 10 volt. So, and no, there's one more that's inside of here. It's kind of funky. It's a paper capacitor, so it's shaped similar to about that, but it's a 0.05 UF, but it's a 200 volt. So I don't really have a lytic I can put in there, so I'm thinking I'm just going to get a ceramic disc that is high enough voltage and replace that. So there you have it. I did my handy dandy Excel spreadsheet. I'll load this out on the file section of the Yahoo group if you want it. I just put down what the original part number is, what type it was, the UF to volts, if it's a PF, I need that, and then my replacement information is over here. If it's 1 or greater, I like to use the ESR meter and just note what the current starting point is, because sometimes you'll find new capacitors that are bad. You say not a lot of quality sometimes. So then note what kind it is and the brand name, just so if I ever have a problem later, I'll know what I was using. Alright, so that's that. It's time to start replacing capacitors, and today we're featuring a Dundee Pale Ale. Okay, I just clipped this Mallory out of the auto speed unit, and this is a tip for you guys that aren't seasoned experts. I just took a pencil and just wrote a little positive sign down here to myself. That way later, if I get busy or get called away, I'll remember that this is the positive lead and that's the negative, without having to try and go back to the schematic. You don't want to wire these in backwards, especially the really big caps. Alright, got this one in. Because the large capacitor was going that way, I turned this but with a pair of pliers. So instead of being horizontal, it's vertical. And because this radial capacitor didn't have long enough leads to reach these 2 points without getting close to this diode, I went ahead, and since I clipped the other one long, I went and used the leads that were from the old capacitor and just cleaned them off real good and just soldered those together. So good, they're decent solder joints, and The best part is everything is routed away, so no wire is going to touch anybody else here. Time to do the next one. Alright, so now I've got these two small black radio capacitors in here, these 100 UF ones. These leads were really tight. I mean, I barely had enough to hook them on, so be careful of that when you're doing yours. Just to let you know, here's the old one. You know, it's rated at 100, and so you're looking at both the capacitor rating and the ESR. So this one has got a rating of 155 and an ESR of 2.2. That might not seem like a lot, but you think about it, this thing plus or minus 20%, it should be max of 120. And the new one that I put in, the meter reading on it was exactly at 103 UF and 0.32 ESR. So bottom line is the new one obviously is low ESR and right where it needs to be. Alright, the last of the capacitors is this one on the top side. It's this paper capacitor that's 0.05, 200 volt. So I replaced it with this Mylar, which is 0.047, 630 volt. I just go out and put the new one in, and then this cover goes back on top of there, and then I'll be done. Put it back in the control center. Okay, everything is done but the paperwork. By paperwork I mean I'm going to clean these contacts that are right here using just a piece of paper that I'm going to spray with some contact cleaner and rub it in there and see if I can get any black gunk off. Okay, and last I'm going to use the cleaner to clean out the potentiometer, which is this stuff is safe for all these good things. It's safe on plastic, it's safe, it's even says recommended for potentiometers. So anyway, there we go. That's nice and cleaned out a bit. Alright, a little tale of two auto speed units. Alright, I rebuilt this one, my very first time of ever working on an SAS1 Auto Speed Unit from a Seeburg Gem. I bought a second Gem as a parts box, but ended up going to fix both of them because they're both easily fixable. So I figured, okay, I've recapped this one. I will go ahead and pull the other one and recap this one as well, since I've got my stuff out. Well, anyway, they are both Type B, or Code B, which for those people like me that didn't really know what the difference in codes meant before a year ago, I go to this manual and I printed off pages of the manual so I can scribble on them. Code A was their first one that they made of the SAS1, and then there was a code B, and then there was code C and D, and they all have different components. A, and then B added, I don't know, about 7 more pieces, and then C and D, if you look at the circles and the little lines, they added these. So basically I guess they keep on improving on it and adding more parts. Problem is you don't know which one you've got, and you don't know what the person before you did. But you'd think since I have two B's, they should be apples to apples, but in fact they're not. On this one I went ahead and replaced everything, and it was actually all per the code B schematic. This one, for whatever reason, someone before me had added a fuse right here, and they had removed this capacitor. So this capacitor wasn't on this one, and this one has a fuse, which this one doesn't. Well, if I look in here, there is no fuse line on the list, but if I look on the C and D type or code, there is a fuse, and it's a 2 amp fuse, and that's what was in here, a little pigtail, and it goes right there, and that is actually where he put it. But on this C and D one, they've added these other components which actually are in line, upline of this fuse before this contact switch. So, no clue why the person removed this capacitor, but I added it back in, and since there was a fuse there, the fuse was actually blown. It was a bus GJV 2 amp 250 volt. I basically put in a new fuse in line where the old one was. Haven't plugged it back in yet to see if it's going to blow. But just wanted to make this quick video to say, hey, there's differences. I don't know why. Even in these two code Bs, I figured, okay, though I would be able to trace wires on this one. Well, on this one, the wiring that went up to this fuse is actually a white and black stripe. Whereas on this one, all the wiring is black. There is no white and black stripe. It's all black. And this one has a green wire that runs around, whereas this one has a yellow wire. So, just to let you know, this one has different color marking on these big honking resistors, whereas this one has black lettering on it. So even though you're working on the exact same, and this has got, that's a light blue and that's a dark blue. So even though you're working on the exact same thing, both a code B of an SAS1, different wiring, different parts. I mean, this has got a black disc capacitor, it's got a brown. You're going to find differences. So when you're talking to somebody else, even if they had the exact same one, it doesn't mean you're going to find the exact same things in it the same way, because they just kept changing things. Anyway, for you newbies like myself out there, I thought this would be a good video just to give you some insight. Alright, so I just reinstalled the auto speed unit into the control center, just held in by 4 screws. Just sits right in there, then you just plug it in. You can't goof that up at all. Only one way. Before I plug this thing back in and see if it works into my jukebox, I'm going to put it into a dim bulb tester here, which is, I've learned from Duke and others that this is the way to do it. So I made this little thing, and so if the light goes on dimly, as a dim bulb tester should, then I've done it okay. If I've screwed something up, then it's probably going to be a bright light. So here goes. Ready, set. Alright, it's a dim bulb. Good deal. Alright, so now it's time to plug it back in and see if it works. Oh, one last thing is, this was really rusty on here, and even though I wiped it down a lot, it's still giving off rust. I hate getting rust on my clothes, so I think I'm going to get some of that paint that you paint on, or that chemical you paint on, that it actually converts this from rust to some other kind of iron and turns it black, so it'll stop rusting. Not that this thing looks good by any means, but you know, don't need the rust.